All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here for us. Before we get started, just Keisha, if you can hear me, just want to go over a couple of quick little house rules for us as we're going through. So I know it's probably not an issue at this point in time, but we are going to be recording this class so that other people can watch it. So just make sure that if you don't want your camera on, that's fine. Make sure you go ahead and mute yourself once you come on, just so that there's no background noise since we're recording. You can always check out this video and all of our videos about financial education there on our YouTube page. So what we're going to be looking at today, right? Let me go ahead and get started on the slides. And I apologize, my computer's running a little bit slow today, so there might be a little bit of delay as we're going through. But what we're going to be talking about today is the foundations of financial education and financial success. So I don't know about you, but I've probably spent more than half of my life being confused about what I'm supposed to do with my money, right? So sure, I know that I'm supposed to pay down debt. I get that, pay down my credit cards, pay off my loans. And I know that I need to start putting some money into savings, which would probably be a little bit easier if Uncle Sam weren't taking so much out of my paycheck. And how much exactly is he taking out of my paycheck, right? What does that taxable amount end up being? And what about what I put into savings? How much money am I going to be earning off of that? I mean, when I check my statement, I earned 3 cents last month. There's no way in the world I'm going to retire on that. So should I look at a money market? Should I look at a certificate of deposit? What are even the options for what I need to do? And if I'm talking about retirement, well, what's a 401 and a 403 and an IRA and gosh, IRS, right? So it's tax pre-tax, but there's also penalties if I withdraw it early. So don't even get me started about investing, right? I mean, that I'll get back to you next year, right? And I don't think that I'm alone in how I do this, right? I don't think that I'm the only one that's doing this because really and truly, they don't teach us this in school, right? So my name is Hope. I'm a financial education coach with Prosperity Connection. And we're here, our goal is to help everyone understand what's going on with their money and figure out what their options are. Doesn't matter where you're at on the spectrum, how much money you've got coming in, how much debt you have, what's happening for you right now is not necessarily the issue. We all have issues no matter where we're at on the spectrum. It's about figuring out how to take advantage of the options that we have and understanding the pros and the cons. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here today. Because really and truly, it's honestly, nobody teaches us about the basics of financial success, financial stability. There's no Money 101 class that we get in schools, right? I mean, it would have been a lot more helpful than geometry, at least for me, unless of course you're a geometry teacher, in which case it's fine. Geometry, I use it a lot. It would have been a lot better than my English lit class, okay? So we'll go with that one. But the truth is nobody taught us. Nobody taught us how to fill out our taxes. Nobody taught us how retirement works. Nobody taught us about compound interest. So what we learned, we generally picked up from a variety of sources, maybe our parents or our guardians, but honestly, they probably weren't taught either. So we've sort of pieced together little pieces of this from what we learned from them, what we picked up from our friends, what we Googled, what we learned about on Pinterest or TikTok. So it really shouldn't be surprising that most of us are really kind of stumbling our way through what it means to be financially successful or financially stable, right? So what we're here today to do is to look at giving you a sense of how to move forward, right? We're going to give you an unofficial user's guide to your money. And I'll be honest, I'm not Warren Buffett, right? So this is really a user's guide. It's not meant to be the absolute law about what to do with your finances. And really and truly, that wouldn't be right for me to say anyway, because all of us are different, right? What I want for myself financially, what my idea of financial success is different than yours. We come from two different backgrounds. We have two different things. I like spaghetti, you like Chinese. We're all different. So our money answers are going to be different too. But what we can talk about and what we're going to focus on in today's class are the basics, right? The building blocks of what you need to have and what you need to be aware of when you're creating sort of that solid financial foundation for yourself, okay? And even if you're not basic, right? Even if you're like, hey, Hope, I've been doing this for years. I've been going to you guys' classes. I've done one-on-one. I check out all the videos online, right? It's still always a good idea to have a refresher, right? Even the best athletes, even the best musicians, all of us have to practice. So even if you've been doing this a while, it's easy to find out that sometimes you let a few things slide, or maybe you forgot a few pieces along the way. So we're going to get started making sure that you got a basic fresh start. All right. So we're going to look at 6 of the basic foundations of financial stability. And we're going to start with number 1. And number 1 is you need a bank account. And I know this is basic. We're starting right at the basic level. But if you don't currently have a bank account, or you're not really using that bank account, it's time to take another look at it. I get sometimes that it may be hard, or you may have had bad experiences with the bank. But if you're wanting to set yourself up for future success, you need to have a partner in your financial journey. You need someone who's going to help you along the road. And banks are really a financial assistant for you. Okay, whether it's a bank or a credit union, any kind of financial institution, they're sort of your helper in the background. And they're going to give you access to services and opportunities and security that you can't have without that bank. So when you're thinking about having a bank account, right, whether it's checking or savings, important things to remember are that having that account is going to save you money. So you're not going to be paying for check cashing fees. You're not going to be paying for money orders. You're not going to be paying for transfer fees, things like that. And if you are using a cash only system on this one, if you're paying for cash for everything that you've done, because either bad experiences in the past or you've owed money to banks keep you from opening that account, in reality, you're spending over $200 a year roughly for those services, right? Whether it's money cards, whether it's money orders, whether it's check cashing. If you're using cash only, it's about $198 extra per year out of your pocket simply to pay for those services that the bank will provide for you. The other thing to think about is that having a bank actually helps keep you on track with your money and your transactions, right? So in the background, while you're doing all of your stuff, they're coming up with the paperwork. They're actually doing the transactions of the money, and they're keeping a record of it, and you have access to that record. Because you have access to that record, you can look at it at any time to measure your spending, measure your expenses, and see where you're at with what you have left in the bank to use, right? So it helps you stay on track for what you're trying to do. And it also protects you and your money, okay? So it's a security level. If you have money in a bank, right, even though you may be slightly worried about that, it also gives you an insurance. Right? It gives you a guarantee, and it's federally insured by the government on this one up to $250,000. So if something happens to that bank, if there's a fire or they're robbed, it's not your money that's gone. The federal government ensures that they will get your money back to you. If you're robbed or your house has a fire, kind of out of luck, right? There's nobody out there that's going to be able to replace that money. It also protects you because you now have this record that we talked about, right? So if somebody has scammed you, if somebody's taken money, or someone's even gotten into your account, there's a record and you have someone to go to that will help you make the claims to the police and make the claims to the government to get your money back. So having that assistant gives you a little bit more leverage. It's also convenient, right? So if I don't have my money in my pocket right now and I need to get gas in the car, if I don't have a bank account or a debit card, how am I going to get that gas, right? I have to go back home. I have to get my cash and come back out. And if I had that debit card, all I have to do is swipe. So it's very convenient for me to have money in the bank, right? So I have access to it through a number of sources other than just carrying it in my wallet. It's also kind of interesting too, when you think about it, just sort of as a little side note, there are ATMs available to get your cash across every continent in the world. In fact, there's even some in Antarctica. In fact, there are 2 in Antarctica. So as far as being convenient, it's everywhere. Lastly, I do want to make sure though, before we move on, that you understand that having a bank account is actually a service, right? It's not a given that you'll have a bank account or that everything you do there is going to be free. It's not just a basic assistant. Whenever you have a service is a cost, and you need to be aware of that going in, right? So if they're keeping track of your money, if they're transacting for you and getting your money to the bills and to the creditors that you have, they're making sure that it's safe and secure. That all takes work on their part. And we got to pay for that work, right? So most of the banks generally make their money from the fact that they're using our money on the backside for investing in loans. So they're making some money off of the money we put into the bank. Now, that's a really simplified version of how the banking system works. But just to sort of give you an idea, if you don't have a lot of money in the bank account, if you're not keeping a basic balance, or you're not even using it, not really using your debit card or putting money in and out, they don't have a way to make money off of your money. And when that happens, then you start running into what we call fees, right? It's things what they're going to ask you to help them pay for the services that they're providing for you. So when we look at that, things to keep in mind when you're having a bank account is monthly fees. Generally, you can talk to your bank, and if you have either a minimum balance or a certain number of transactions a month, that fee is waived. Just make sure that if you're not taking advantage of it, you know that it's going to cost a little bit of money coming out of your checking or your savings. They also have service fees, so be aware of those. These are for extra services. So if you needed to get a notary public, if you needed to stop a check, extra that you're asking them to do that's just not part of the general everyday services that they provide, you may end up paying different service fees for that. And finally, the thing that probably catches most of us or makes us all a little bit unhappy are what we call negligence fees, okay? And these are your typical, these are your overdrafts or your non-sufficient fund fees that we're trying to do. And we really want to watch out for those. These can add up fast. And this is generally the reason that most bank accounts tend to get like ugly fast, right? So if we don't have money in our overdrafting and get an overdraft fee, we're now 18. To just be aware of those fees as you're going through. We want to make sure that you're aware of anything that may hit you because you're paying for those services. So having a bank account is important, but we want to make sure you're aware. Okay, so to sort of recap on this one, as far as having a bank account, big important notes to do, tips, make sure you read your paperwork. You're signing an agreement or a contract with that bank account or with that banking institution to make sure that they're providing you with certain services, and they're going to give you all of the paperwork about what their responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are. So make sure you're taking the time to look over the information that they give you, look at the information online now, understand your responsibilities. And if there's something that you don't understand or some term that you don't know, don't hesitate to ask questions, right? Don't be afraid to talk to your bank. They're your financial assistants. They're there to help you. Make sure you're using them as much as possible to get what you want out of your life financially. All right. Any questions about having a bank account? If so, put it down in the chat. Feel free to use that. If you come up with questions along the way, I'll be checking that chat box along the way, as well as coming back to anything that we don't get to during this, the actual slide presentation. So any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Moving on to number 2 is going to be a budget. Ouch, right? I know, I do. Nobody ever likes that word. And I understand it's about diets. We all have this conversation over and over again. We know that we should do it, but we don't. And it's because it feels awkward and it feels like it's work and it feels like it's deprivation, like I can't do something. But having a budget is the single most important thing you can do to make sure that you are financially stable and financially successful. And it just makes sense. I know I'm not preaching to the choir on this one. I know you guys understand this, but just to drive it home, if you don't know what's happening with your money, how can you do anything else? That's what a budget is really for. That's all it really comes down to, is knowing what's happening with your money. There are 2 pieces. There are 2 ways that a budget works for you. So the first one on this one is knowing what's happening with your money. You need to know how much money you've got coming in to work with, and you need to know how much money is going out. What are your bills? What are you paying out for entertainment? What are you paying out for your rent? What are you paying out for your car? What's coming in, what's coming out, and where is it going? Now, when we start looking at that process of what's coming in, what's coming out, There are all sorts of different programs out there available on the internet. We have several of them on our YouTube page you can look at for how-to videos for how to do budgeting, literally step by step how to do it. There are lots of forms that are available for you as far as templates that you can use for budgeting. There's all sorts of help. So be sure to check that out if you want details. I'm not going to go into it too deep here simply because of time restraints, but make sure you look it out. We've got lots of good videos. But in short, as we kind of look at this for budgeting, it's a very simple process, right? So we want to add up all of the income that we've got coming in. We want to add that all together. And then we want to go through our bank statements and our credit card statements or our transactions, and we want to write down all of our transactions, all of our expenses, and add them up, right? And then we want to compare those numbers. How do they compare to each other? Is there more left over at the end of the month than what came in? In which case, I need to go back and find a job for that money, right? I need to go back and figure out where I've got that extra and what I want to do with it. If there's not enough left over at the end of the month, then I need to go back up into those expenses and say, okay, where do I need to start cutting? Where do I need to come through that these will actually compare back and forth? That's budgeting, right? That's the basic process. Very simple addition and subtraction. But that's not where budgets shine, and it's not enough to track that spending. So a lot of us do that, right? I mean, we try. That's where we start. We start tracking this stuff. We even get apps on our phones. We use spreadsheets. We use forms to do. But that's not really where budgeting stops, right? We got to look at the second part of budgeting, and that's to make a plan for what you want your money to do. Okay, this is where budgeting really takes off and becomes helpful to you, right? We need to make sure that your money is doing what you want it to do. It's not just paycheck to paycheck going back and forth. You actually have a plan and you're making sure that that money is helping you get where you want to go. We need to put your money to work for you. All right. So when we look at this, what we're kind of looking at is a sense of setting financial goals for yourself. And making sure that you're spending time understanding not only that you're working, not only that you're going out to eat and you're taking, where do you want to go? Let yourself dream, let yourself plan for those things that really matter for you. Because no one's going to want to do a budget for very long if it's just a matter of adding and subtracting and adding and subtracting and adding and subtracting. That's no fun. But if you know that that work is getting you closer to what matters to you, then you can understand why you're doing it and keep up with it. So set financial goals. A couple of things about goal setting. This is another one of those major parts of setting up yourself for financial success, is to be able to set smart financial goals. So what we want to look at is making sure that as you come up with these goals, you make them specific. Be detailed with yourself. If you say, I want to make more money, that's great. But it's kind of hard for your mind to sort of switch around and say, well, how am I going to do that? Right? It gets distracted easily. We know that. We know that for sure during COVID. We get easily distracted. So we need to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success by being as specific and as detailed as we can. If you want to make more money, what is that? I want to make an additional $200 a month, right? That's going to help me pay these bills. That's what I want to make. How can I get there? Now my brain starts looking and saying, well, I can take an extra job, or I can get an extra couple of hours with my work. Or maybe I can sell something. I can sell my guitar in order to make sure that I'm able to bring that money in, right? Be specific and make sure that your goal has a time frame, that it's time oriented, right? So set a deadline for when you can do it so your brain knows how much it needs to work on that. And lastly, make sure it's measurable. Okay, so again, look at that idea that we just had. I need $200 more a month. Well, if I have $50, well, I'm this here, right? So I know that I have this much further that I need to go in order to reach that 200. So make sure that your goal is specific, make sure that it's measurable, and make sure that it's time oriented when you're writing it down. And that's the next piece. Make sure you write it down. Right? It's been proven time and time again that when we actually write our goals down, when we put them in black and white where we can see them, that act alone tells our brain and our bodies, this is important to us. We're going to go. We're going to do it. We're going to find a way. So make sure you write them down, make it as pretty as you want to, make it as big as you want to, and post it somewhere where you can see it. Maybe that's the refrigerator. Maybe it's the mirror. Maybe it's inside your car if you're doing that one. But make sure you're keeping it front and center in your mind. Make sure you're setting it as a priority. The other thing that you can look at with this one is adjust, right? So we don't always necessarily, excuse me, I went too fast on that one. We don't always necessarily get it exactly like we planned it, right? So we may say, I want $200 this month, but something may have come up and maybe I got a flat tire and that money had to go somewhere else, right? It doesn't mean that I'm quitting on my goal. It doesn't mean that my goal wasn't work. Doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean that I'll never have that. It just means I need to adjust and reset my aim and see where I have to do. So whenever you're setting your goals and things aren't going quite the way you do, or you hit a bump, just understand it's okay. Life has a way of kicking us when we least expect it. Adjust your goals, adjust your time frame, and then keep going. Don't quit. All right, so that's goals. Now let's take a look at what that leads me to, right? Because we want to make sure we're doing plans with our money. We're making the budget. We're kind of setting plans. We're setting goals. And as we're doing that, leads us into the next basic foundation piece, and that's savings, right? So your next basic guide is to start a savings plan. If you haven't already, the first thing we want you to start taking a look at is emergency savings, right? So during COVID, especially, we all learned how important that is to have sort of a safety net of cash back in the background to keep us set. And when we talk about that emergency saving funds, the general knowledge or the general suggestion is to aim to have 3 to 6 months of monthly expenses. Now, I want to take just a second here and make sure you're clear on what we're talking about. We're talking about 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses, what it costs you to live. So that's your rent, your utilities, your gas for your car loans, your credit card payments, all those expenses that would go in to make sure that you are good to go for that month. So if something were to happen to you and you lost income, you'd know that you'd have at least a few months worth of time where you weren't going to have to just go into like homeless shelters, into your car, give up everything you ever had, that type of setup. So it's monthly expenses. It's not your monthly salary. And it's not just living life where I am right now, right? I'm going out to the ball games. I'm having a good time. I'm buying clothes. I'm going shopping. It's not that either. It's somewhere in the middle. Your monthly expenses for your base living expenses. The other thing to think about here is that's the suggestion, right? But most of us, that's really hard to reach all in one little jump, right? So all of a sudden trying to come up with $6,000, $8,000 that I can just put into a savings account somewhere, that's not very realistic for any of us. So while this is the suggestion, what we want to make sure that you understand is start wherever you're at, right? And then as you have more, add a little more. So if that sense of saying, oh, well, I don't know where I would possibly come up with $2,000, well, let's start with 200. Is that possible for you? And if we can start putting that money into savings each month, let's work with that. And then as we get used to that, we can grow it a little bit more at a time. If all we can do is $25 in a month, perfectly fine, right? It's starting right where we're at right now to start that savings plan, to start getting us on the road to a better future, and then adding as we can. And a good kind of idea to start with, if you haven't gotten anything at this point in time, set that first aim for about $400 to $500. Right? Keep it manageable, something that can be done within about a year as far as you looking at what you have available in your paycheck to do. Once you get to 500, then we can bump that up to 1,000. You can bump it up more after that, but start somewhere. The next part of savings I want to talk to you about, that next savings, there's lots of different savings accounts you can go for. You can save for vacation. You can save for a particular outing. You can save for holidays. But really when we're looking at this one, the next most important one we want you to think about is retirement savings. And it gets a little weird, right? Because retirement is actually investing too, a little bit of that one. But let's look at it just as savings for right now and make sure that we're getting you in line to start. Again, the general suggestion is to aim for about 10% of your income that you're putting away each month into a retirement savings. That's sort of the ballpark for when you're starting out young. It gets a little bit higher than that as you get older, right? Because you need to make up for a little bit of time, like myself, that you're trying to make up for what you didn't do when you were 20. But that's a good aim. It's a good place to start, at least put your hat or wrap your head around that one. And just like with the emergency savings fund, start wherever you're at, right? If you have a 401 or a 403 at work, talk to your HR about getting set up, see whether or not they have matching grants, see if it's 1%, 2%, maybe it's a set amount, $50 that comes out of your paycheck that goes into your retirement. But start wherever you're at. And as you get used to it, as you begin to stretch, add a little bit more to that. All right, it can grow with you. Finally, when it comes to savings, make sure you automate, right? Make sure that you are paying yourself first. Generally, we oftentimes look at savings as far as what's left over after I pay all of the bills. And if we leave it to us, it's gonna never actually happen, right? I mean, how many of us are like, oh yeah, okay, I'll get to that. I'll do that next month. So take it out of your hands, make it a successful thing for you and say, hey, it's automatically going to do when I get my paycheck, this certain amount goes into my savings account before I ever even see it. It never even comes into my hands. It's just directly over into savings where it's starting to build all on its own. And if you haven't heard of that before, that sort of pay yourself first, let me take just a moment with that one, because it can be like, well, sure, but hey, the rent doesn't care if I pay myself, right? But you're the one doing the work. You're working hard for your money. Why are you paying everybody else except you, right? So make sure you're taking a little bit of time to pay yourself first, put some money into retirement and into emergency to care for you, to make sure that you can move forward. All right, that's savings in a nutshell on this one. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of information. But just to sort of wrap up, savings is a really valuable tool. So make sure, as you're looking at this one, that you're understanding that savings is a safety net for you. It's safety for life's unexpected bumps and hiccups to make sure that you and your family are secure and can keep moving forward. It can also save you a ton of money, right? If you have money in savings in this emergency fund or general fund, in interest and fees for not having to put it on credit cards. Right? So if you're starting to put a little bit money back into savings for yourself to buy the things that you want, but you're not having to do it on credit, that means you're not having to pay the credit card company all their interest fees and minimum payments and late penalty fees and fees for just having the card, whatever that may be. So it's actually going to save you a ton of money over time if you're able to just slowly begin putting money into savings. In fact, let me give you another little piece of trivia while we're here, right? So how many people can guess what a ton of money would look like? Any ideas? Feel free to unmute and let me know, right? If anybody wants to take a wild guess, how much would a ton of money be, do you think? Or put it in the chat. Here's the thing, a $1 bill, $20 bill, doesn't matter, just one bill, one piece of currency, actually weighs like 0.4 grams, right? So it's going to take 454 bills, whether that's all singles or not, 454 bills to make a pound. So if we start looking at a ton, right? If we did all $1 bills, it would take over a million $1 bills to make a ton of money. So a ton of money could technically be considered $1 million. All right. With this one, just make sure you're not leaving your savings to what's left over, right? It's a valuable tool. Make sure you're putting it in your plan. You're putting it first in your mind as far as something that you need to do. You are worth more, and your family is worth more, and your financial future is worth more than just leftovers. Okay. Any questions about savings as before we move on? If so, go ahead and unmute, kind of raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. Everybody good? All right, again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them through. And anybody let me know if I'm looking at the chat, but if anybody sees a question come through that I don't see, by all means, please let me know too. All right, so we've looked at 4 so far. Let's move on to the 5th one that we're going to look at. And I have to tell you, this one is the most popular, right? This is the powerhouse. This is the one we always think about first, right? So this is the star, the prima donna, the diva of financial security, financial success. and that's credit, building credit. But is good credit really that important, right? So, okay, I mean, I've heard it back and forth, right? Some people say, no, don't buy with credit. You don't want to put that on credit. You don't want to pay those fees. No, you don't want credit cards. Why would you want to pay extra for that one? Don't buy a car until you can buy it outright in cash. Just save it up, right? So that seems to indicate that maybe credit and buying on credit, not so good, right? But the thing about it is credit is really kind of just sort of one of those parts of our lives. It's a necessary part of our lives. We pay a cost for it, yes, and it's easy to get in trouble with it. We need to make sure that we're watching out. But it's a really vital part of just our everyday life as well, right? I mean, how many of us can just go to the bank and pull out $25,000 for a car, right? How many of us would have $150,000 to go buy a house? That takes a long time to build up that kind of savings. So having that large cash availability or access for ourselves, not necessarily very realistic for most of us, right? Also have to understand that having good credit opens up doors to opportunities that you're not going to have if you're not consciously building that credit, right? So the ability to get student loans, perhaps to go to college so that you can get a degree, so you can get a better paying job, so that you can send your kids to college, right? You're not going to get a yes on that loan without good credit. What about buying the car, right? So the cars that you currently have is wearing out. You need to get a new car. If you're not having good credit, right? If you can't buy on credit and you don't have the money saved up, you lose that opportunity. What about buying a home, right? Having good credit opens up opportunities for you in the workforce, in your personal life, and in the things that you can own, right? So yes, it's important to have good credit. It's also very important to know that it helps with emergencies. Again, we talked about that in savings, right? Life kicks us sometimes when we're least expecting it. And we all of a sudden have to come up with hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars for medical emergencies, for damage to our cars, for a limb falling off of our tree onto our house. Having good credit means that I have options for fixing that or for dealing with that emergency. Also understand you already have a credit score, whether you're using credit or not. Most all of us have some type of a credit score, even if that credit score is no credit score, right? So even if you're not consciously using your credit, even if you haven't done anything in the past 6 months, there's still something out there at the credit bureaus that says, here's what you look like credit-wise. Here's your character credit-wise. Here's how you handle credit and money out there. And those reports can be seen by individuals in helping to make determinations about things for you, right? So it's used for a lot more than just whether or not they're going to give you a loan for a car or give you a loan for personal use or for a house. Landlords can use that and pull your credit to see whether or not they're going to rent a house to you or rent an apartment to you, right? To see whether or not you have a back history of paying your bills and paying it on time. And they're not the only ones that can look at your credit report, right? Utility companies can look at them. Cell phone companies can look at them. Insurance companies can look at your credit report. All of them are providing a service to you in the future, right? So they're giving you a service first, and then you're going to pay them back later. So it's perfectly reasonable that they would want to check and make sure that you have a history of paying on time before they give that to you. And if there's no credit or a bad credit, they may choose to charge you extra for those services to help protect themselves. Okay, so yeah, it's important to have good credit for a lot of things that aren't just related to loans. And one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, what about employers, right? Especially if you're working in something that has money involved with it or any kind of a security clearance. They're going to be pulling your credit report and making decisions about whether to hire you or not based upon what's in that report. So all of those are important reasons to build good credit and to start the process. If you haven't been using credit or have ever used credit, there are some services that you can start looking for. There are credit builder loans, there are secured credit cards, there are authorized users. There's lots of information on our YouTube page about how to help you build credit And we're doing classes every month. So keep tuning in for that one and I'll give you resources later. But it's important to build credit. It's also important to use that credit once you get it wisely. All right. So when we're looking at this, what does that mean to use credit wisely, right? We want to apply only for credit when you need it. So we're not getting a card from Macy's and we're not getting a card from Home Depot and we're not getting a card from Victoria's Secret and we're not getting a card from Indiana. Wherever that is, whatever we're trying to do, they're all out there going to offer us credit, right? Because that's a profit for them. It's up to us to say, no, I don't need that. I don't need to have all of this extra. It's important to build credit, but I don't need to go hog wild and get every credit card, right? Apply only for what you need when you need it. The second thing, first most important rule, make your payments on time every time. It's 35% of your overall credit score. That one thing. This is how the credit bureaus are scoring you. Are you making your payments on time? Can they count on you to make your payments the way you agreed to do? So make sure you're making those payments on time. Make that the highest priority and keep your balances low. Okay. Make sure that you're staying at a level that you can actually pay back each month. You don't want to max out your credit cards. You want to use the credit that you need, yes, but you want to make sure that you're living within your means. Having a credit card doesn't mean you can just go and get whatever, right? That just means you're going to get into trouble because as you charge more and more and more, if your income's not keeping up with those extra charges that you didn't have money for to start with, how are you going to continue to pay those back? So keep your balances low. The aim here is under 30%. Okay. So if you have, let's make this easy, $1,000 credit card, you don't want to carry anything more than $300 on that card from month to month, right? Under 30% to make sure that you're using your credit wisely and keeping a good score. Lastly, always make sure that you're paying more than the minimum. Don't fall into that trap, right? It can be very tempting to be like, oh, I only have to pay $25 this month. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to go out with my friends on the game and I'll pay more next month, right? I'm just going to pay the minimum. Avoid that trap. Because when you're paying the minimum, you're mostly only paying the interest, not the principal, which means that amount that you originally charged. And when you're not paying on that amount that you originally charged, that just keeps sitting there earning more and more interest that you're going to have to pay. So make sure that you're constantly paying more than the minimum whenever possible to make sure that you're trying to do it. And if possible, pay it off every month, right? That's going to save you all the interest. You just basically, in that case, the credit card is just sort of loaning you the money for free. You're paying it back before you have to pay for it. Does that make sense? Everybody understand? It's kind of like they loan the money for you ahead of time and then you're paying it back before they charge you. Any questions about that? Jesse, I see one in the chat. Do you advise adding a child as an authorized user to build a healthy credit history, provided that the parent has a pristine history and continually responsible use? I think in some of that, yes, authorized user is a great way to start building credit. Look at the idea of the child though. And I think I'm gonna get back to you a little bit more on that one. I believe you need to be 18 and over to be an authorized user. I don't know that for a fact. Please, this is the unofficial guide. I'll get you the actual answer. Yvette or Carol, I know you're on the call too. If you have that specific setup, please feel free to answer her back in the chat. I would really appreciate it to make sure we get her the right information. But for any of those that are on there listening, I will get the information and make sure that I send that out to everybody who was on the call today. Sorry, I don't have a better answer than that, Jesse, but yes, authorized user is a great way to build credit, not only for a child. There's also the new credit cards that are out there. I believe Greenlight is one of them, where literally you're sort of doing a prepaid credit card for them type of setup that helps them begin to show those and start to use credit in a way that they can begin to get used to it before they get a credit card themselves. So that's a way to help them learn. Authorized users are also really good for people that don't have credit or have poor credit and cannot get a credit card on their own. But you hit it right on the head. Make sure that that person that you're the authorized user with on this one, you're both using credit wisely, okay? Not just you, but the person who has the card to start with. You don't want to get their bad credit on you. And you don't want to do the same to them. If they're nice enough to get you on as an authorized user, you don't want to max out the card and then give them a ding to their credit either. Okay. All right, moving on this one, sort of recapping. When it comes to credit, building credit and using it wisely, building and rebuilding credit, please know it just takes time, right? Credit is a long game. No matter how much you're doing, no matter how hard you're working, no matter how soon you need that credit score, it follows its own time frame, right? It won't happen overnight, but it will happen as long as you're using those habits that we talked about to use it wisely. Make sure you pay on time every month. Make sure you keep your balances low on this one. Make sure you're paying more than the minimum balance. And don't go out and request lots of new credit. Those are called inquiries, and those affect your overall credit score, right? So give yourself time. Understand that what they're looking for is your history, right? They're making a value judgment about the actual loan, not you. That's important to understand as before we move forward. Your credit score has nothing whatsoever to do with your value as a human being, right? Or what you offer in this world, or your smile, or your laughter, or the things that you're going to do for us, right? It has nothing to do with that one. It only tells you, hey, I'm likely to pay this loan back, right? That's it. But as you're doing it, understand that those people are looking at to make decisions about things they can do for you. So give yourself time to build it and make sure you keep doing those little steps. It's not hard to build credit. It just takes time. All right, that takes us through number 5, which brings us now. We've talked about 5 of the basic steps, right? In managing our money. We've talked about banking and having a safe place to keep the money. We've talked about budgeting, knowing what's happening with our money, keeping track of it, and making a plan for it. We've talked about setting goals for that plan, how to make sure we're setting smart goals that are realistic and that we can actually reach. And we've talked about savings, talked about creating that safety net for ourselves and a reserve for the future, right? We talked about credit. And with credit, really what we're talking about is allowing ourselves to extend out, right? We get a little bit larger. So we're able to do more than what we actually have resources for, right? So I have so much income, that's not quite enough for me to buy this car. Credit allows me to expand out, to look outward, right? So we've looked at those 5 pieces. The last step that we're looking at here is sort of the roof over our building, right? It's the roof over our foundation. And it's about protecting what matters. Everything that we've been working on. So we've been working really hard to build our credit. We've been working really hard to put money into savings. We've opened up a bank account. We've got the job. We're going through every month and checking our spending. We're making sure we're staying and living within our means. Now we need to make sure we protect everything that we just put in there, right? So a couple of things to keep in mind and make sure that you're paying attention to as far as protecting all of this hard work you've been doing. Make sure that you review your bank and your credit card statements regularly. And by that, I mean monthly, right? It's part of that budgeting process that we talked about earlier. You're going to be checking to see what your expenses are and keeping up with that. But you also want to use it to make sure that what you're being charged for is really yours, right? Somebody didn't steal your identity. Somebody didn't steal your card number. Somebody didn't steal your social security number and try to pretend to be you. And also to make sure that what's on there, like fees or extra charges that weren't there, that you can then make sure that that's coming off and you're talking to the credit bureaus or the bank to make sure you're not paying for things that aren't your responsibility to pay for, right? Protect what you've got. Make sure that you're checking those bank statements and credit card statements regularly. That's all yours. Make sure that you review your credit report each year. Right? Every year you get a free credit report from annualcreditreport.com. And I'll get that in the chat here in just a little bit. You can request all 3 of your credit reports or just one at a time and spread them out over the year. But even if you're not necessarily doing a lot of work with your credit, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else isn't trying to, right? So make sure that at least once a year, you're checking into the actual report. That's what you're going to get on annualcreditreport.com. And I'll get that into the chat here right quick if you don't know about it. So I can't type and talk at the same time very well. So make sure you're checking that one. It's a little bit tricky. I won't lie to you. When you go on and try to do it online, they're going to ask you some questions because they need to make sure that it's you that they're giving that information out to. So the questions they ask you are about information that would be found on your credit report. And it's not just your most obvious stuff, right? So kind of try to understand and have some information in your back of your mind before you do that. They'll ask the questions. If for some reason you're unable to give them the correct answer, or you're unable to remember that, because it happened to me, they'll come up with a little warning that says, can't give it to you online, but just send us the form and we'll mail it to you. Okay, but make sure you're checking that credit report each year and go through it line by line to make sure that the trade lines that are there, the credit that's out there, your name, your payment history, the amounts that you owed, those are all correct and you're able to verify them. That way, if there's something on there that doesn't belong, you're able then to dispute it to the credit bureaus and file any police reports that you need to for identity theft. But you can only do that if you see it. Next up on this one, pay attention to those pesky passwords, right? We're talking about protecting yourself. I know it's horrible. We all have to take care of like 20 million passwords every single month, and they're all changing and requesting changes. But when it comes to protecting yourself online and making sure that your accounts, especially credit card accounts, bank accounts, anything that has payment history in it, you need to make sure that that password is secure. Look for password managers that are available out there. Look for tips and tricks for how to change up your password in ways that are unexpected. And they've got some information on our blog, so you can look at that one about doing fast, easy passwords that are easy for you to remember, but hard for hackers to guess. But pay attention to those. If someone's asking you to put in a new password, especially a bank or a credit card, make sure you're putting that in and putting it in quickly, making sure that it's enough different that somebody couldn't guess it. Next up, don't agree to anything that you don't understand. Don't agree to anything where you feel pressured when it comes to finances, right? So if you're looking at trying to get a loan and you don't understand the terms, or it's not actually written on the contract what the interest rate is going to be, or what your payments are going to be, or when those payments are due, if the interest charge over the life of the loan isn't there, if they're guaranteeing you, if you just sign, you'll get the cash today, right? Those are all flags that these are like predatory loans, predatory lending. They don't have your best interest in mind, right? They're trying to pressure you into something. If you feel that, step back, ask questions, and be prepared to walk away. Yes, sometimes we need loans. Sometimes we're in a desperate position and we have to take chances or risks that we wouldn't normally. But you always need to be sure that you're protecting yourself as best as you can, right? That you're paying the least amount in interest charges and that nobody is trying to scam you or steal your monies, okay? If there's something you don't understand, ask. If it's a reputable person, they'll get answers for you. They'll be able to answer. And don't hesitate to walk away and ask somebody else, right? See if you can get some help either from your financial assistants there at your bank or from a friend or somebody that you trust. Don't feel like you have to do something. Finally, as far as protecting, let's talk a little bit about insurance, right? So that's kind of one of those things where none of us really like doing it. We're insuring about something that hasn't really happened yet. It feels like we're throwing money away. And oftentimes we feel bad because then when we make a claim on our insurance, the insurance raises our rates, right? Or drops us, or a number of other things. So I get it. It's not a very fun topic for any of us. But when we talk about protecting ourselves, one of the things I just want to make sure that you're paying attention to is the need to protect yourself against the big stuff, the financial catastrophes that leave you hanging, right? That you cannot bounce back from. We're not talking about, I'm going to get an extended warranty on my washer and dryer. I'm going to get the extended warranty on the electrical tool that I just bought, things like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about life insurance. If somebody in your household is dependent upon your income and something happens to you, life insurance can help protect them. Insurance on your car. If something happens to that car, you're in an accident, how are you going to cope with the loss of that vehicle? How are you going to get back on your feet? Health insurance. If something happens to you, how are you going to be able to pay the hospital bills, get the help that you need, and still be able to keep living your life and paying the bills, right? So when we talk about insurance, there are lots of different products out there, lots of different servicers. Make sure you're asking around, do some comparison shopping, but understand that having that insurance is kind of like that safety net of savings for you back there too, right? It's protection for those things that matter the most to you and that you cannot easily replace or easily live or cope with the fact that it's gone. Any questions about that? Or about insurance in general? I am not an insurance salesman. I do not know insurance, and I'm not certified to talk about insurance. So I can't go into anything of those, right? But just make sure you're checking those out. And don't over-insure, right? A lot of people get into, okay, well, the insurer said I needed this, this, and this. Lots of times you don't. Be picky, ask questions. Always, with everything we're talking about, ask questions, advocate for yourself, invest in yourself. All right, that's our 6 foundation pieces, guys. That's our user's manual on this one for our basic steps of how to, or let's put it this way. These are the basic steps of what we have to pay attention to make sure that we are creating a stable foundation for our money, right? So as things happen, we're able to adjust and kind of move with the flow on it a little bit, but we're still staying strong. We need to pay attention to these 6 areas and make sure that we're keeping those in our priorities in our forefront. Any questions about anything that we've talked about so far? Jesse, I see, Jesse has a question in the chat. Is there a need to keep monthly statements after you reviewed them? There are certain rules about that one as far as suggestions, not rules. Generally, I would say 3 to 6 months, right? So if you have a statement in hand in your house, you want to make sure, number one, you're staying safe, right? That it's someplace secure that nobody can just sort of see it because it has your basic information on it and sensitive information on it. But you want to keep that someplace safe where you can get to it for 6 months. If you're looking at it online, generally they will keep those online and available for you to print out for up to a year. So if you wanted to get rid of the paper copy and just be able to access it online, that's fine too. Certainly nothing over a year as far as your bank statements. As far as investment and retirement accounts, again, retirement is not a big deal for me. And when it comes to investments, I'm that person, remember, that said, I'll talk about that next year. As far as the rule for that one, I would say about a year for anything that's just like here's what's happening, here's what you see in your investments, to keep that handy. Anything that has to do with legal agreements for that one. So when you started up that investment account, when you started up that retirement account, that you keep indefinitely, right? That's a contract in your agreement. You want to make sure you're keeping that in a safe place to have whenever you need it. Any other questions? You're very welcome, Ms. Jessie. Hopefully that answers, and if I find anything different or Yvette finds anything different, we will get back to you, I promise. I don't want to give you wrong information. All right, anybody have any questions they want to put in the chat? If you want to unmute, put your camera on, come in and talk to me, you're welcome to do. I've been talking to a blank screen with a little light on top of it for about an hour now. So I would love to see your faces, but it doesn't look like anybody else is coming in. So let me just say this. I will give you my contact information here. Make sure that you're contacting me. If you don't have a question now, but something comes up, you are always welcome to contact us here at Prosperity Connection. That's our goal. That's what we're here for, to help you understand what's happening with your money. Make sure you know what your options are. You can always talk to a coach. You also have options as far as finding out more about any of these topics more in depth than I went into in this quick little overview, right? So make sure you check out our videos on our YouTube page. They have all sorts of creating budgets, lots of videos about home buying and how to get started with that, how to repair or build your credit, how to deal with collectors and collections, lots of different information that you can actually tailor for what you're needing at this particular moment in time, right? So make sure you're checking us out there or on Facebook to find out more information. Check out our website for when our next classes are. And if you'd like to speak with a coach, right, whether you have an informal question or you want to actually start with one-on-one coaching to actually look at your finances and what your options are, give us a call or contact us through our email at hello@prosperityconnection.org, right? Our website, www.prosperityconnection.org. Thanks, guys, everybody, for joining us today. It has been a real pleasure having you here. Hopefully we gave you a little bit of information that you can work with and at least sort of a guide or a framework, right, of what you need to do in your life to make sure you're reaching your goals. You guys take care, stay safe out there, and we will see you again soon. All right, bye now.